Welcome to Spiritual But, a one-of-a-kind talk show creating a new global conversation about inclusive spirituality. Whether you're religious or not religious, this show seeks to inspire you to discover your own unique spiritual experience. And now, here is your host, award-winning author and actress, Anne Scottlin.
Hello and welcome back to this live streaming show. I'm Spiritual But here on USA Global TV Network. So happy to have you back with us today. As you know, this is an amazing show, one of a kind show really, that talks about spirituality from a perspective of openness. We're a show about inclusive spirituality. So everyone is included, everyone is welcome, and no one is judged. So this creates a safe space for people to talk about spirituality, whether you're religious, whether you're not religious, and finding how you can take your personal experience to the next level by observing what other people have done, what they're doing in their current practices, and observing their spiritual journey. Because for those of us who know we are extremely spiritual people, or even a little bit spiritual, we know that our journey changes over time. So it gives us the opportunity to observe how others' journey changes over time as well. So this is a live show. So please leave your comments, leave your questions. Would really absolutely love to hear from you. Both myself and my guest today, we would love to hear from you and answer those on the air if we can. So let's see, before we get started, any other announcements? I think that's it. All right. So I'm really excited to introduce a friend of mine who I absolutely adore, and I'm so glad she was willing to join us. A lot of you know my backstory, and hers has a lot of similarities. And we're going to talk a little bit about what it's like to be in an extreme religious experience. Now, that's from our perspective, what we feel extreme was for us. So that might not be extreme to someone else. And her journey to where she is today and how she finds her ability to practice her spirituality passionately and authentically, even though she's no longer religious. So today's episode is called I'm Spiritual, but I'm Not Religious. Deb is a massage therapist, a yoga teacher, and all in all, a holistic, I'm going to call her a healer, because everything she does is about helping people heal body, mind, and soul. And she is a beautiful soul. So if you will, please welcome Deborah Wade.
Hi.
Hi, Deborah. Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well this morning.
Good. I'm so happy to see you here with us, and excited to talk to you about your spiritual experience. So I have this quote. Everyone knows we usually bookend the show with a quote, and the one you gave us today, I absolutely love. And it says, "Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water." That's a Zen proverb. And I think that I'm going to have to print this and post it in my office, because I love this so much. Share what this means to you.
So this came to me at a time when I was searching to try to find exactly the right thing, or the right formula for happiness, or whatever you want to call it. And my sister shared this quote with me, and the intention behind that was, don't squander the journey in search of some perfect goal, because whether or not you achieve that, the day-to-day tasks are going to continue. And so if you can find meaning, find something sacred in just the everyday, then that becomes important. That's your journey. And that becomes the enlightenment, not just finding a specific goal.
Right. That's amazing. So the journey is part of the enlightenment, actually. And I love it because it also, sort of to borrow from Christian scripture, there's a verse in the New Testament where Jesus says, occupy, he says, till I come. But the idea is that we're here to do our job. And, whether we're religious, whether we're not religious, whether we're spiritual, regardless, we continue to live in this world. It's like so obvious that we have to occupy the space, carry water, chop wood, and realize that we are grounded, we are okay, regardless of whether we're sort of free floating and still searching for our spiritual experience, or whether you're really solid. So I think that's just such a beautiful example. So let's talk a little bit about how you grew up. I know we grew up with a lot of similarities in a very similar experience. So share a little bit about, your experience growing up.
Okay. Well, so I grew up in an extreme right-wing fundamentalist religious group that really believed they were the one true way to heaven, God, the afterlife, whatever you want to call it. But with that came a lot of pressure. Not only are you a sinful person, you're also in charge and responsible for saving the world. So it was a lot of pressure, a lot of existential dread and anxiety and depression.
That's interesting. Sorry.
So it's just so much pressure to try to be perfect, but also witness and be responsible for every person that you possibly meet to try to help them and save them. So it made relationships with people and just experience as a human be all about witnessing and all about that kind of behavior. So it really takes away a lot of skills of how to just be a friend and how to be a friend to yourself when you're always constantly trying to put other people first. So like now I deal in a lot of self-care, and you can't take care of other people if you haven't cared for yourself first. And so that's in direct contradiction to what I was raised with.
True, right? So right. And the fact that you had to have an agenda for every relationship, as opposed to having a relationship and just connecting with a human being, human to human. Instead, you had to have agenda, and that sort of guilt of feeling that you were always, even though the quote unquote message of gospel hope was supposed to be positive, I can relate to feeling dread every day and feeling depressed and never feeling good enough and always feeling like I was going to be judged by God or others. Tell me a little bit about, you really struggled with this as a child, like this existential dread. Even as a young child, share a little bit more about that, because, I think some people wouldn't, know what that looks like.
Okay. So one of my very early memories in church, there was a beautiful young woman. She was probably a teenager, and I was 4 or 5, I don't know. And she was wearing a bright pink shirt. And I had never seen anyone in our group wear a bright color like that before. And I was so impressed. And my mom had tried to get me to wear bright pink for during hunting season, because we had lived on a farm in the South and people were hunting deer. And they didn't hunt on our property, but you never knew where the deer was going to go. And so just for the safety part of it, just to wear a hot pink color. And I was resistant to it, but I would go along with it. And when I saw her doing it, I thought, wow, this is okay. I could do this. So I'm following her around, 5 steps behind, like she's the queen. And I hear person after person, all these adults saying, oh, she's being promiscuous. Why would she wear that bright color? She's being a Jezebel. All these really negative things when I thought it was just a color. And so it added another layer of, oh no, how am I ever going to achieve the perfection that I'm supposed to and the ideal of a sinless life when I'm wanting to just wear a bright color, and I apparently am not even supposed to do that.
Wow. Yeah. And what was it like to just wake up? Well, first of all, let's a little bit more about you. So you are the youngest of how many kids?
So I'm the second youngest of 10.
Are you the second youngest of 10? Okay.
The youngest girl.
Youngest girl. Okay. So that must have been really interesting to have all those older brothers and sisters. Did they all take the religion as seriously as you did, or was there differences?
There were some differences, but when I was young, I believed they all did because I didn't know any
Yes.
different.
Right.
And I was taught that the verse in the Bible that says respect your elders meant do literally everything that anyone who's even a minute older than you says to do. So not only am
Wow.
I trying to follow my parents' instruction, but also my 8 older siblings and any other
Wow.
adult who happens to be around. So I felt so much anxiety around trying so hard to do the
And
right thing.
danger. And danger.
Yeah, because
Because when you're told that you have to conform to absolutely anyone else's wishes, no matter what, you are in a really vulnerable position.
right, and it's not like I believed that if I didn't obey, oh, well, I might get disciplined. It was that, those stories in the Bible of being swallowed by the earth or struck by lightning or turned into a pillar of salt. I thought that was going to happen to me.
Yes. I think that's kind of one of the things that my parents were converts to our right-wing religion around the time I was born.
Mhm.
So, um, but I think that is something that they never fully, to this day, even though they're still practicing devoutly, understood, that they grew up in, let's call it an average American middle class environment, if you will, uh, with all that formative, radio, TV, all the things you and I didn't have, books, a lot of other people involved, in our life, social activities. So I don't think they realized how terrifying the religion was when you had no other global construct. When you didn't say, oh, as a 5-year-old, this is a religion that is part of a greater world, that is like, it is a perspective, even if your parents think it's right, but you think it's literally all there is. So when we had, those Revelation lectures and all the scary beasts up on the screen and posters and dragons with claws and the woman, the harlot with a cup of wine, and like, because of course there was no drinking either. Those pictures were so dramatic, and on materials that were always laying around and book covers. And I would have nightmares about those things. Did you ever have nightmares or kind of dread around
Yes,
the
I
scary
was
stuff?
always terrified going to sleep that something was going to happen or that I really truly believed in demon possession or that the devil could possess people in real time. And so at night, I felt especially vulnerable. And going to sleep was super scary. Looking out the window was super scary because I had all these images of devils and demons and all the beasts from Revelation. And I believed that that's what I could be seeing out my window.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's kind of one of those things, that parents sometimes don't understand the impact. In my case, in your case, your parents were multi-generation within that practice, but mine weren't. So it's sort of like mine went in full, hardcore, if you will, into it, but not really realizing that they had already been formed as humans. They had already had their mental and emotional like base built, and they were like 30 at this time when they joined. So it's really different when you're very young, and it continues to astonish me, truly. I mean, you're younger than I am. I mean, and I meet people all the time, even teenagers in this work that I'm doing, that are coming from backgrounds like this, and I'm like, really? Still? I just feel like it was back then, and there is like, well, but people know differently now, and surely that can't be. But no, it's actually prevalent, especially in the United States, and so hard to articulate. So part of what I like to share on the show is just creating awareness around that, because I think there's 2 really specific challenges that can be addressed. One is just sharing a message with everyone that they are loved and belong to us as a human race, and we care. and 2, if they come from such an extreme experience, that there is other ways to practice their spirituality without feeling guilt and dread. Some people take their own life because they're so depressed around their belief system, and I'm sure you've seen that. So it's tragic, and I think that teaching, the greater community to understand that this is real, and then also helping people in that situation. If they're happy, fine. I'm more power to them. I'm not against religion, but if they do want to find a new way or a way to balance and have less fear, then I think, even the Bible says, not to have a spirit of fear, but of a sound mind. And I think sometimes that everyone forgets that verse. But, oh my goodness. So what were some of the other kind of challenges or your spiritual experience back then? Did you feel like you were a very spiritual person?
Oh, I did. Yes. The demon possession thing, that was a big one. Not knowing what stranger I happened to see at the big box store might be possessed that day.
Wow.
But also food. Food was a really big one. When I was really young, we were vegan and then slowly became vegetarian. And that was very difficult for me to go from only margarine and soya cheese to having vanilla dairy ice cream and real cheese and real butter, and trying to understand and put that into context and how that was going to be okay. How was that not going to damn my soul forever? Because our family was now eating butter.
It's so funny. Like, this is why I love you so much when we talk, because there's only so many people in the world who can understand this conversation. I remember when I was 12, my parents were also vegan. For those of you who know, this was kind of part of our religious, cult-like experience. Was very controlled around diet. It was very controlled about absolutely everything. How much water you drank, you name it, it was there. How many hours of sleep you got. It was just everything was like a rule.
Yes, like how many times you chewed your food.
Yes, literally, how many times you chewed your food and, lay down your silverware and fold your hands between bites, at least at my house. I mean, oh my gosh, no snacking between meals, 2 meals a day, not 3. Again, all from scriptures from a prophet, a modern day prophet, so these lifestyle choices were very unique and complex. And we were vegan. And I remember when I was 12 and we went out I was kind of becoming extremely pious around 12. I decided I just needed to grow up fast because I had almost no kids around. I was homeschooled, and there were very few kids in our tiny, tiny church anyway, mostly retired people. And the way to get affirmation was to behave like an adult. So I was like leading classes and teaching in church by the time I was 12, and also just went through this phase of, well, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it right. Type A, firstborn, Capricorn, whatever. It's like, and so I remember my parents, we went out to eat, which was a real treat. Usually we didn't have the money for it. We went out to eat, and I remember they had nachos, and I remember being so mortified that they were eating cheese. And I was like, oh, I can't have any. And they're like, why? And I'm like, well, because it's cheese, it's dairy. And, that's not good for our body temple. And, and even my parents, see, to them, that wasn't so strange. To them, veganism was a lifestyle choice for health and the mind. But for me, it was kind of like, we also were obviously kosher in a certain sense, like we didn't eat pork and things like that, or any meat. But but it was almost like pork to someone else that I couldn't eat cheese. And they were like, really? Well, okay, if that's fine. And I felt so disappointed because I really wanted the cheese. But I also, which I love cheese now, you guys. I cannot give it up. I'm vegetarian, not vegan, because I have to have cheese. It's like there's certain things you're just deprived of for so long that once you can have them, you're like, I love it. Anyway, but I felt very pious for my choice, that even in front of my parents and siblings, that I stood up for what was right. I used to have conversations with my brothers, and I'd be like, so if you had, if someone, because this is a little triggering. So it's an example of violence, but it's not real violence. We believed a very violent future was coming. And we would say to each other things like, so if someone held a gun to your head and said that you had to eat pork, would you do it? And we would be like, no, I'd rather die. And we meant it.
Yeah.
So, right? And that's hard to explain to people. So when I see people in other religions and other cultures that have extreme attitudes or have a culture of religious violence that is violent towards other people, I disagree strongly, but I also understand what it comes to when it comes from a mindset, a training. I'm not going to use the word brainwashing, but whatever you want to call psychological manipulation. I understand why they do it, even if it's wrong. Because
Yeah.
when you're so young and you have this conviction drilled into you for so many years as the only worldview, you honestly don't know there's another worldview.
Mm-mm. And things like food, that's a moral issue in
Right.
addition to being, a act that you need to do for God. But you believe your body is a temple, and if you're choosing to violate that, then you're saying, yeah, I want my soul to be ended. It's like
Right.
committing suicide in real time, like saying, yep,
Right.
I'm done, God, you can take me now because I'm making
Because,
a bad choice.
yes. Oh, and didn't you live in fear of like saying a bad word or something and then getting in a car accident and dying and not being able to go to heaven? Well,
um,
those are some of the things I did.
so for me it was that I thought if I didn't confess my sins to God in prayer in real time for every single one, and I missed one, that would be it. So I
So did
never
I.
knew if I asked, and it could have just been a bad thought, thinking, I wish I had that person's skirt because it was pretty. And to me, that was, coveting what my neighbor had. And therefore, that was an evil thing to think. And I needed to confess for that. And yeah, and it was just such a concern that, you know, maybe my life would be over before I would even have a chance to confess to things I may or may not even realize were about a problem.
Yes, absolutely. And again, I mean, we're sharing this just to create awareness of how a lot of people in this country actually live. Clearly a minority, but there's we're talking tens of thousands of people and more that live this way in the United States, and raise their children this way. And it's not all bad. I learned a lot of good things from my parents. I learned how to be a hard worker. So did you, working on the ranch, working on the farm, learned how to grow my own food, was very creative and imaginative because I had no entertainment of any kind. There's a lot of, I fell in love with nature. There's a lot of big wins that made me who I am today. And I'm grateful for that. But I also see, I think some parents, especially people that are converted in as adults, I think even those people who choose to continue to practice this, it's worthwhile to see what the child's experience was like. Because if they're raising their own children, they might want to explain more things or create an environment. Basically, you take everything you hear as gospel truth. A lot of it is just people's opinions, and the burden becomes so heavy. So as far as having like a happy, bubbly childhood, I have no idea what that means. Did you?
No, no. I didn't understand how other children smiled so much
Yeah.
and how they could just play the way that they could just play and be relaxed and have a good time and yell and scream. How the fate of the world and humanity as we know it literally rested on our shoulders.
And you're like 8.
Yeah. It seems strange thinking back about it now, but at the time it was just so serious. I didn't make friends very well in school because I was in the middle of judging them for all their horrible sins, like eating white bread, because I thought that was bad. And it was so funny. Now it's so funny. At the time, it was really mean and judgmental. And I really wish I could have known better. The part about Jesus says about loving your neighbor is so much more important than judging. In fact, it's not for us to judge at all.
Oh, yeah.
But, yeah.
And life will teach you those things. It's very humbling, because of the way I was raised. I always, even as a young adult, I was very extraordinarily judgmental. I mean, I did things right. Again, the whole type A firstborn, like, if you're going to do it right. I'm all or nothing. That's just how I am. And so, I was always, whenever I'd hear of someone getting divorced, I was just like kind of disgusted and like, they mustn't even try and they mustn't have God in their heart and all these things, because that was what I was exposed to. I didn't have any idea what real life was like. It was all really theory, honestly. And then living with people who had the same theory. So nobody really, there was very little sort of real world. I was very unprepared for the real world. So when I did go through my divorce as a younger-ish adult in my first marriage, I was so humiliated. I can't even tell you how humiliated. And I didn't want the divorce. It was not what I wanted. And, but it was a safe choice. And, but I was so embarrassed to be that like tarnished goods, that tarnished person, and to be around other people that believed that same way was so painful when you're already suffering so much and you think the love of your life has left you, your parents disagree with you, God has probably left you, and you're at like the bottom, feeling like, well, I did all the right stuff. So how come everyone disappeared when my life fell apart? Because, oh, it's my fault. Or, the only alternative is to get back together with a scary person. Or, it just so humbling, though, because suddenly you're like, oh, I wonder about people who do this, or people who have this preference, or people who have the, you're like, wow. So being a person is, everyone has really good reasons for the things they do. And if that doesn't line up with my theology, I might have to review my theology a little bit. Which was always really challenging. But yeah, so kind of coming to terms with that and feeling like now I have to sort of start integrating into real life. So tell us a little bit about how your experience of integrating went and is going, or however you want to describe it.
Oh, yeah. So I would say that is something I am still working on. The first memories I have is when, my father had left the church shortly before, and I thought he was lost. And then my mom left, and I couldn't believe it. And I had all these questions, like if pants were a no-go for women.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
like, well, does this mean if I wear pants, that's okay now? Is my older sister who wears makeup now not going to hell? Because I had a lot of Southern Baptist influences as well that got mixed in with the extreme group. So as a kid, I didn't really know what was what. And that was so strange. But we kept a lot of the beliefs, even though we had left the church. And I say we, my parents had left, and I was just left going, okay, what end is up now? And so we still kept, our holy day, and we kept a lot of the same practices. And slowly, my parents began to study other groups and religions and theories and ideas, and started to expand their idea of what was acceptable and okay. But I still held a lot of those beliefs because it didn't make sense to me. This is all I'd ever known. And now we were supposed to be okay with something else. And it was so scary when my mom read Omnivore's Dilemma and decided that maybe eating meat was okay. And I came home to her making homemade from scratch Salisbury steaks, and I thought I was gonna be sick. It was so horrible. But I just couldn't believe it, because this was taught as like such a bad thing to eat any animal products. And then it was like, okay, well, maybe honey and butter are okay, and eggs, because you're not harming an animal to get those things. And then to have her eating meat on purpose, cooking it herself, like, it was really hard to wrap my head around.
Yes, no, that's so strange. Yeah, I find it even to this day shocking, because I can't eat meat. I've tried. I mean, in a pinch, and not to offend someone, if I'm traveling in another country, I might eat some fish or maybe some chicken, but it's literally not my lifestyle. It's not my choice, typically, because I still just don't like it. I have the mindset, one of my brothers and a lot of other people I know who came from that kind of a background have no problem with eating meat. They were eating hamburgers by the time they were in high school. They just, whether they're sneaking out to get them or whatever, but I just it was so deeply ingrained that I can't enjoy it, which I think is sad. Some people enjoy it a lot, but it always kind of blows my mind when we go to, every once in a while, we'll go out to dinner, take my parents out for their anniversary or something, and we'll just take them to a nice place. And my mom will order chicken and my dad will order steak. And I just am completely speechless, sitting there going, oh, that's right. They grew up on this. They don't necessarily think it's wrong. They just have a choice at home. They don't eat meat. But I can't even eat meat if I wanted to, because I'll be ill. Like I can't. So I don't even think they see that, like the depth of the psychological programming was so complete that even as an adult, I can't overcome it, which is really fascinating to me.
Yeah, it took me a long time to be comfortable with eating any meat, flesh, if you will.
Yeah.
Because it was such a it wasn't just a sin and a moral issue. It made me sick too. The smell of it, the texture of it, like I would try and it would come right back out. I couldn't digest it. It took me being extremely hungry and being given no other food option, stranded at a KFC. The power in the entire went out. The power in the entire town went out, and they were like going to have to start throwing food away. And we were waiting for a friend to get off work, and she's like, "Do you want anything?" And my brother says, "Yes, give us a bunch of chicken strips." And I didn't know. We didn't go out to eat. I had no idea what food was available at KFC, and I didn't know they had vegetables. So I just thought, wow, this is a chicken place. That's probably all they have. So I guess if I'm going to eat, and I was so hungry. I hadn't eaten, since breakfast probably. And it was like 10 o'clock at night. I was so hungry. And I thought, well, maybe if I eat the breading off this, it'll be okay. And I was probably 13 or 14 at the time. And I finally was like, okay, let me do it. And it tasted good. And I'm so shocked. I was like, oh my gosh, I understand. People eat this because they enjoy it. Such revelation.
Oh my gosh. Well, I know all of these things are such extreme examples, but so real for Deborah and I in our lives. So thank you for everyone watching to listen and appreciate that this was our personal experience. That's a lot what this show is about. If you have any comments or questions, please drop them in the chat. We would love to hear from you. And we're going to continue on in a moment here and talk about finding our spiritual way, even when you come from such a rigid background. Because I think it's super valuable for parents to understand that if they choose a very extreme lifestyle, how it can formatively affect the children. Even if they choose that lifestyle, people could have done a lot more explaining to me. I think just saying, hey, so this is a belief, even if I might disagree with it now, here's a belief, but this is meat, but it's not, you're not going to go to hell. Or like, we choose to do this for healthy reasons, or, kind of articulating I was that kid who always asked why in questions for everything. And I drove my parents absolutely bats. But, kind of like, well, because we said so, or because the prophet said so, or because the Bible said so, or whatever, you kind of got these pat answers and you're like, wow, so you just go 100% with it. And you don't understand that where the lifestyle would be different from a practice of faith and a loving religious experience, whatever that was, right? So, so how have you found your way out? How have you found your footing? And I know we're all at different parts of our journey with this, and I've been journeying out even longer than you have. How do you find your footing now as a wife and mother in a normal community, serving people, healing, giving back, doing massage, teaching yoga? How do you find satisfaction in your spiritual life when, as you said, for the title of this episode, you're spiritual but not religious?
So what that means to me is that I don't look to any specific religious dogma to lead my life by. But there's a lot of different religious beliefs and practices that I really respect. And incorporating those is how I would say I practice. I wouldn't
Mhm.
say I have like a specific, there's not a formula that I can give you and say this is what I believe and how you should do it. I just do what feels right for me. And a big part of that is connecting with nature. I don't believe we
Mhm.
visit nature. We're just going back to where we're from.
Mhm.
And I don't worship nature. It's just
Mhm.
where I feel most connected with the divine.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
How do you Oh, sorry. Please
I say,
continue.
and part of that is service to others. And that probably is quite a bit of
Mm.
the
Mhm.
conditioning that I grew up with. But
Mhm.
I feel that connecting to other people is
Mhm.
such a wonderful way to connect with something bigger than ourselves, whether it's
Mhm.
just another human being or
Yes.
the community in general. And in my
Yes.
practice, of course, that is human to human.
Mhm.
Come as you are, leave all your titles and your masks and everyone and everything that you have to be for everyone else at the door, and just be
Mhm.
who you are,
Just be.
and I will meet you there.
I love that. I love that. And learning the ability to let go and just be okay with being yourself in the present moment. Being calm, like learning to function without fear.
Oh,
And
that's
it's not always
huge.
physical fear, but learning to think and behave and function without terror, I would call it often. And it's hard to explain, but it's so beautiful when you can find those moments. And it comes back and you
Mhm.
get, like you'll get kind of a surge and anxiety all comes back. And then, okay, wait, I got to reframe this so that I can relax and be present and live in a space that's sacred for me. A safe that's sacred for me is where I get to shine and be my best self and help others most. I think it was the Dalai Lama, and I use it all the time, that say that humanity is my religion. So humanity is my religion. That's why my day job is teaching people, is us being a socialpreneur and teaching other social entrepreneurs how to find grassroots on the ground ways to change the lives of people around them and in their own communities. That's giving back because we care, and learning how to move forward. So, any practices other than nature that you have found have helped you um, transition in your spiritual walk?
Yeah. So when I was in massage therapy school, they taught us the basics of mind body medicine and meditation. And I had not really practiced any of that before. I'd been to a few yoga classes and they scared me quite a bit because I thought that was, a pathway to demon possession.
Yes,
And
I
while I
agree.
didn't really
Was
believe that
my
anymore, I
belief.
also didn't have any framework for how to think about it and what that meant. And in massage therapy school, they taught us the basics of yoga and how it's just a way to connect your mind to your body and to be present with yourself. And when you spend all your time trying to act a certain way and be a certain way, you don't really know yourself. You don't know what you want in that moment because you're
Mm-hmm.
not being you. You're not being
Mm-hmm.
authentic. You're just trying to fit an ideal.
Mm-hmm.
And that space of learning to meditate and practice yoga and just be present. And
Mm-hmm.
also with massage therapy, because whether you're giving or receiving, you have to be present for it to be effective
Mm-hmm.
and to really connect with your client. And so that's been a big part of my practice also,
Wow,
is
that's
just learning
amazing.
learning presence, that
Mm-hmm.
this is, wherever you go, there you are.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm.
now is all we have, and to be present. And
I know, it's so crazy hard, but so beautiful when you can achieve it. So we're going to start wrapping up in a minute or two, but one last question, if that's something you can answer or not, but which is, so how do you practice what we used to define as prayer, or maybe we still do? I still pray, but it's just a different experience that it used to be. How do
yeah,
you communicate with the divine, and how do you find motivation, answers, healing, comfort, wisdom? How does that manifest itself in your personal spiritual walk?
So prayer used to be begging a vengeful God who was, hovering in the sky with his army of angels, just waiting for me to step wrong and blast me to please, not hurt me.
Mm-hmm.
And I no longer believe in that that picture. That's no longer
Mm-hmm.
my concept of what
Mm-hmm.
God or divinity is. And it's more of just that part of the universe, whatever you call it, whatever your religious belief system is,
Mm-hmm.
that is the encapsulation of love, that is divinity.
Mm-hmm.
And just allowing myself to feel connected to that, and
That's
to
amazing.
ask for whatever it is that I feel like I need, and to let it go. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's a big part of prayer, whether you're
Yeah.
practicing a specific religion or not, is that thinking about what you need, feeling what you need, and then just letting it
Mm-hmm.
go and giving it
And
back to the
watching
universe.
for it. Yeah, and watching for what you're asking for. So whether for someone, if that's God, whatever God that is for you, if that's a higher self, if that's higher consciousness, if it's whatever that is, spirits and guides. Even if I can't articulate it and define it clearly, I still feel it. And I am grateful for my spiritual upbringing, because there was a connection made that I will never lose. I tried to really hard to be an atheist for a year. I couldn't do it. It was almost deadly. I didn't want to live, because I couldn't live without an element of hope. And this is the thing. Other people can do that easily, and that's fine. But for myself, you have to find what works for you and connects you to the divine in a way. And when you can give up the fear of a vengeful God, it really does help so much more. We could have such a major theological discussion about all of this. But I love, again, the quote you gave us earlier, the Zen proverb that says, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. Because we just carry on with life, be present, and we continue to live and function. But we can find more peaceful ways, brighter paths, more loving environments, and people to support us in that, and people that we can support, which I just think is beautiful. Before we go, I have asked Deb to share with us another passage that is absolutely beautiful. It's called Desiderata by Max Ehrman. You may or may not have heard of it, but it's, I know, one of her favorite passages, and it has also become one of mine since she introduced me to it. So, Deb, would you mind sharing that?
Yes. So before I do, I just want to say that it's important to make peace with your existence as a human on this planet, because so much of the beliefs that I was raised with was that we were here, but so much of it was a problem. So much of our existence was sinful and evil, and only through certain acts and beliefs could we be okay. And so part of that making peace really came through to me when I first read this passage. And it's a poem in prose, like she said, by Max Ehrman. Go placidly amid the noise and the haste, and remember what peace there may be in silence. As far as possible, without surrender, be on good terms with all persons. Speak your truth quietly and clearly, and listen to others, even to the dull and the ignorant. They too have their story. Avoid loud and aggressive persons. They are vexations to the spirit. If you compare yourself with others, you may become vain or bitter. For always there will be greater and lesser persons than yourself. Enjoy your achievements as well as your plans. Keep interested in your own career, however humble. It is a real possession in the changing fortunes of time. Exercise caution in your business affairs, for the world is full of trickery. But let this not blind you to what virtue there is. Many persons strive for high ideals, and everywhere life is full of heroism. Be yourself. Especially do not feign affection. Neither be cynical about love, for in the face of all aridity and disenchantment, it is as perennial as the grass. Take kindly the counsel of the years, gracefully surrendering the things of youth. Nurture strength of spirit to shield you in sudden misfortune. But do not distress yourself with dark imaginings. Many fears are born of fatigue and loneliness. Beyond a wholesome discipline, be gentle with yourself. You are a child of the universe, no less than the trees and the stars. You have a right to be here. And whether or not it is clear to you, no doubt the universe is unfolding as it should. Therefore, be at peace with God, whatever you conceive him to be. And whatever your labors and aspirations in the noisy confusion of life, keep peace in your soul. With all its sham, drudgery, and broken dreams, it is still a beautiful world. Be cheerful. Strive to be happy.
Wow. Thank you so much. Oh, it really touched me and I got emotional every time I hear it. Again, for all of you watching, Desiderata by Max Ehrman. And if you are listening and can't read that right now, you can email me or at imspiritualbutt@gmail.com. Thank you so much, Deb, for sharing that with us, giving us that little bit of hope and light. And I literally feel lighter just having heard that beautiful message. And thank you for your courage and vulnerability and willingness to share a very personal story to you in an effort to help educate and enlighten others and encourage others who might have had a similar or even just a regular conservative background, how they can still find their spiritual joy. So thank you so much. And thank you to all our viewers for being with us here today on I'm Spiritual Butt. Join us again next week when Roger Leslie will be back next week for our episode. It'll be live as usual at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Roger Leslie will be here and talking about his new book and as a Christian man coming out of the closet and how he has found joy and peace and the message that he has to share with others. You'll really not want to miss that. And also stay tuned. Keep your eyes on my website and or checking in here because of the brand new show coming to you on USA Global TV here. My new show is called Global Socialpreneurs. And you're going to hear a lot more about that. How can you change the world from a grassroots level in a sustainable way in a for-profit endeavor? How can you have encourage and design new social initiatives? And how does it, similar or not similar to nonprofits, and how are they sometimes overlapping? It's going to be really exciting. We have amazing people lined up. That's going to start in June. So stay tuned and you won't want to miss that either. Thank you all for being with us today here on I'm Spiritual Butt. Boy, when I start talking fast to wind up the show, it just doesn't go right. Love to you all. Be well and have a joyful week. Thank you.